After years of sacrificing for my family, I discovered a secret that changed everything. Betrayal, lies, and a shocking truth. Watch what happens when I finally stand up for myself. My name is Emma Miller, and for most of my life, I've done everything by my own two hands. At 33, I've built a career as a self-taught day trader. Nothing came easy, and I wasn't born into wealth. I spent sleepless nights poring over charts, learning patterns, and making calculated decisions that eventually led me to success. I'm proud of what I've achieved, but the journey hasn't been without its sacrifices. For the past 5 years, I've taken on the role of the family's financial backbone. My father, John Miller, and my mother, Linda, have always seen me as the capable one, the independent daughter who could manage on her own. And so, I did, while taking on more and more of the financial responsibilities that came their way. I paid the property taxes on their vacation home without hesitation, even though it was a significant expense. I took over the car payments for Sophie, my younger sister, when she claimed she couldn't afford it. And I covered the cost of family vacations, making sure everyone had what they needed. First, I didn't mind. Helping my family was just something I did because it felt right. After all, I wasn't struggling in the way they were. I had my career and I could afford to lend a hand. But after years of giving and giving, I started to feel something I hadn't expected: resentment. It wasn't the act of helping that bothered me. It was the fact that no one seemed to notice or appreciate it. Sophie, who was still in her early 20s, continued to live as though money grew on trees. She rarely had to worry about anything, and somehow I ended up footing the bill for most of it. My parents never directly asked for anything, but the expectations were always clear. I spent countless nights thinking about this, about how I had sacrificed so much of my time and money for them while keeping my own life on hold. Yet every time I brought it up, the conversation was quickly dismissed, and I was told I was doing fine and didn't need help. But the reality was that I was always the one giving, and they were the ones taking. I couldn't help but feel like a walking ATM for their needs. The final straw came one evening during what was supposed to be a quiet dinner. The table was set in their cozy dining room, and we were eating the meal my mother had lovingly prepared. It was a typical family night. Nothing unusual. But then, as we were finishing up, the conversation shifted. My father, who had been relatively quiet until then, suddenly launched into a tirade. He was upset because I had refused to help pay for their upcoming family vacation. I had already covered so much over the years: taxes, repairs, Sophie's expenses, and I couldn't justify throwing more money into a vacation I didn't even want to go on. "How could you be so selfish?" my father shouted, his face turning red as he paced across the living room. "Your sister needs that money for her new business venture. You have more than enough." I sat there, stunned into silence, holding onto the property tax bill I had just been handed. My father's words were cutting, and they felt like a slap in the face. For years I had been supporting them in silence, never asking for anything in return. And now I was being called selfish because I refused to do more. "I've been paying for everything for years," I finally managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. "The property taxes, Sophie's car payments, the family vacations. I've never asked for anything back. But I can't keep doing this forever." My mother, seated silently on the couch, avoided looking at me. Her eyes were downcast, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I was used to her avoiding conflict, but this felt different. Her silence stung more than anything my father had said. I felt a lump form in my throat as I waited for her to speak, but she remained quiet. "We gave you everything growing up," my father continued, completely ignoring my words. "And now, you're abandoning us while your sister is trying to make something of herself." That's when I saw the envelope on the coffee table. It was partially hidden under a magazine, but the corner of an official-looking document was visible. The words "Trust Fund" and Sophie Miller were boldly printed on it. My stomach dropped. Without thinking, I reached for the envelope before my father could stop me. "Emma, that's private," he snapped, but it was too late. I had already pulled the document out and started reading. The words on the page hit me like a punch to the gut. My father had created a trust fund for Sophie. A substantial trust fund. And there I was, busting my ass for the family, paying bills, covering repairs, funding vacations, and I had never been told about this. My father, the same man who had told me there wasn't enough money to help with my college tuition, had secretly been setting up my sister for life. My mind raced as I scanned the numbers on the page. $350,000 for Sophie, with additional provisions for future contributions. And I had been told time and time again that the family finances were tight, that there wasn't enough to help me. When were you going to tell me about this? I whispered, my voice cold and shaking. My father snatched the document from my hands, but the damage had been done. The numbers were burned into my memory. $350,000. For Sophie. And I had been left out in the cold. You weren't supposed to see that, he muttered, folding the paper and stuffing it back into the envelope. Clearly, I replied, my voice hollow. I guess that explains why you never helped with my student loans growing up. It all made sense now, the favoritism, the different expectations, the constant demands. I had always been the one to give. But now, I understood that my family had been taking from me all along. The weight of what I had just discovered hung over me like a storm cloud. But the worst was yet to come. My father, John Miller, was furious. I could see the veins bulging in his neck as he stood there, glaring at me, his voice rising with every word. Emma, you don't understand, he yelled, his face red with anger. Your sister, Sophie, is trying to start her business. She needs that money. She's doing something with her life. You have more than enough. You can afford to help. My chest tightened. His words were a gut punch. Here I was, years of sacrifice laid out in front of him, and this was what I got in return: anger. Disbelief. I had been the one holding this family together, and now I was the one being accused of being selfish. All because I had finally said no. I've been paying for everything for years. I shot back, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. The taxes, the repairs, Sophie's car payments. I've never once complained, never once asked for anything in return. But I can't keep doing this. I'm not your personal bank. John's face twisted in frustration. We gave you everything when you were growing up. Everything. And now when we need you, you're abandoning us. Sophie needs help to get started. She's been nothing but supportive to you. The words stung, but what hurt more was the absolute dismissal of everything I had given. I wasn't abandoning them. I was finally drawing a line, after years of feeling invisible. But as usual, my father didn't see it that way. Linda Miller, my mother, sat silently on the couch, her gaze fixed on her hands, folded neatly in her lap. She didn't look at me. She didn't say anything. Her silence felt like the final blow. For years, I had been used to my father's outbursts, but my mother's silence had always been the hardest to bear. She never picked a side, never defended me, not even when it was obvious I had been taken advantage of. I stared at her, willing her to say something, anything, but she didn't. Instead, she just looked away. Her silence echoed louder than my father's anger. I felt more alone in that moment than I had ever felt before. Mom, please? I started, my voice catching in my throat. Can you please say something? She blinked, as if she hadn't expected me to address her directly. Then, without meeting my eyes, she finally spoke in a tone that could only be described as soft and rehearsed. Sweetheart, you've always been so independent, so capable. We're proud of everything you've achieved. But Sophie needs more help than you do. She's trying to make something of herself. And you've always been able to take care of yourself. Don't you see? You've already done so much. The words were meant to comfort, but they felt like a knife in my side. My mother was essentially telling me that my success was what had driven them to take more. She was proud of me, but she was also excusing everything that had been done to me. My entire life I had been praised for being strong, independent, for doing everything myself. But now that I needed a break, I was the one who was wrong. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. And what about all the times I needed help? When I was working 2 jobs during college, when my car broke down and I couldn't afford to fix it. Or when I needed help with my first apartment deposit. I paused, my chest aching as memories flooded back. You told me there wasn't enough. But now I see where all the money went. There was a long silence. My mother didn't respond. She didn't have to. The truth was glaring at us all, but none of them seemed willing to face it. John turned to me, his tone dripping with frustration. You just don't get it, Emma. You're so caught up in your own little world, you can't see that family comes first. Sophie needs this. She needs support. I've supported everyone for years. I shouted, my patience running thin. I'm tired of being the one who sacrifices everything while Sophie gets a free pass. I'm done. John's face flushed. Fine, he snapped, throwing his hands up in defeat. If you're so tired of helping, then fine. Don't help. But don't expect us to be there when you need us. His words hung in the air, thick with resentment. But I was too angry to care anymore. I had been the one holding up the family for so long, and now I was expected to keep giving without question. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. Maybe I don't need you to be there anymore, I muttered under my breath, barely audible. John didn't hear me, or maybe he didn't want to. He stormed off to his office, slamming the door behind him. I could hear his muffled voice through the door, but it was lost on me. All I could hear in that moment was my own heart beating in my ears, and the sound of my mother's silence. The tension in the house was thick, and my father's angry words still echoed in my mind as I walked to my room, my hands shaking. The weight of everything I had just learned felt like it was crushing me from all sides. I had finally stood up for myself, only to be met with more criticism, more expectations. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst was what I had just uncovered. What I had discovered in that moment that would change everything. I had never intended to dig deeper into the family's finances. I had assumed it would be another day like any other, but something kept nagging at me, pushing me to look at the documents on my father's desk. I knew he'd gone to his office to stew in his anger, so I had a moment of silence to myself. As I passed by his desk, I caught a glimpse of something that made my heart stop in its tracks. There, partially hidden under a stack of old papers, was an envelope. The words trust fund were clearly visible, along with the name Sophie Miller in bold, unmistakable letters. I couldn't help myself. My hands reached out and grabbed it before I even thought about what I was doing. I tore the envelope open with shaking fingers, my breath catching in my throat as I pulled out the document inside. It felt like time had stopped. The words on the page burned themselves into my mind. A trust fund for Sophie, a substantial one. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were set aside for her. Money that had been quietly built over the years. Money I had never been told about. I read the document over and over again, the reality sinking in like a stone in my chest. John had done this without saying a word to me, without giving me any warning. He had set up a trust fund for Sophie, my sister, while I had been quietly paying for everything else. The taxes on their vacation home, Sophie's car payments, the roof repairs. All of it had been my responsibility. And all along, they had been hoarding money for Sophie's future. I felt the anger rising inside me, a seething hot wave of fury that burned my veins. This was a betrayal on a level I had never imagined. All those times when I was told there was no money for my education, no money for me to get a leg up in life, it was all a lie. Sophie was being set up for life, while I had been left to shoulder the burden of the family's financial struggles. The tears blurred my vision, but I didn't care. I had been played. I had been the one sacrificing, paying bills, making sure everyone else was comfortable, while Sophie got everything handed to her on a silver platter. My entire life had been spent living in the shadows, doing everything for them, and yet I had been kept in the dark about the truth. I slammed the document back down on my father's desk, my hands trembling with rage. I had given so much of myself, and for what? What had I gotten in return? A silent thank you here, an empty promise there. I had been the dependable one, the responsible one, the one who made sure everyone else was okay. But now, I was the one left with nothing but a pile of broken promises and resentment. I stood there for a moment, staring at the papers before me, the weight of what I had just uncovered sinking deeper into my chest. John and Linda had made it clear that I was just the one who kept things running. They never appreciated me, never acknowledged the sacrifices I had made, the things I had done for them without asking for a single thing in return. And now I saw that the one person who had always been in the background, the one person who had always been considered the easy daughter, had been set up with a future, with security, with everything I had been denied. The truth hit me harder than I expected. The realization that Sophie had been the favored one all along, the one who had been given everything while I worked to keep the family afloat. How could I have been so blind? I had been living a lie. I couldn't stay in this house, not with this knowledge burning in my mind. I had to get out. I needed to breathe, to think, to figure out what to do next. I had spent years sacrificing for a family who didn't value me. Now I was done. But before I could leave, a thought crossed my mind, one that made my stomach churn even more. If John and Linda had been hiding this from me, what else had they kept from me? What other secrets were buried beneath the surface? I didn't know the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Things were never going to be the same again. The house felt suffocating after my discovery. I had stayed in my room for hours trying to calm myself down, but the anger bubbling inside me wouldn't let up. I couldn't look at my family the same way anymore. I had been lied to, manipulated, and used, all while they pretended everything was fine. But nothing was fine. Not anymore. I waited until the evening, when John and Linda were in the living room, talking quietly. Sophie wasn't around, which gave me some space to confront them without interruption. My heart was pounding in my chest as I walked downstairs, the anger I felt like a firestorm inside me. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice steady but laced with fury. "We need to talk." They both looked up in surprise. John frowned, clearly not expecting this, but Linda simply looked at me, her expression unreadable. The silence between us stretched out, thick with tension. I didn't waste any time. "I know about the trust fund." "Sophie's trust fund," I said, making sure they both heard the weight of my words. "You've been hiding it from me. All while I've been paying your bills and taking care of this family. All these years I've been the one who worked to keep things afloat, and you never once told me about it." John stiffened, his face flushing. "Emma, No," I interrupted, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "You don't get to explain this away. You've been telling me for years that there wasn't enough money for my education, or to help me when I needed it. But all along you've been building a future for Sophie. A future she didn't even ask for, while I was left to carry the burden." I could see the defensiveness creeping onto John's face, but I didn't care. The truth was out, and I wasn't going to back down. "You never told me about that trust fund," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "You never even considered that maybe, just maybe, I could use a little help too. But no, I've been the one picking up the slack. Paying the property taxes on your vacation home, fixing the roof, paying for Sophie's car payments when she claimed she couldn't afford them. And all this time you've been silently building her a safety net. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel?" My words hung in the air, heavy with anger and hurt. The silence that followed was deafening. John opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Linda remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. Felt like I was talking to ghosts. "Do you even see me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you even realize what I've done for you all these years? I sacrificed everything for this family. My time, my money, my future, and for what? For you to tell me I'm selfish for not continuing to support you." John finally spoke, his voice tinged with frustration. "Emma, you're overreacting. Sophie needs this. She's starting a business, for God's sake. We're doing what's best for her." I shook my head, the tears I'd been holding back threatening to fall. "You're not doing what's best for anyone. You're doing what's easiest for you. Sophie gets everything handed to her while I'm left to pick up the pieces. I'm done. I'm not going to be your ATM anymore." I turned and started walking toward the door, my hands shaking, but the words burned through me. I didn't want to look at them anymore. I didn't want to hear their excuses. But before I could leave, Linda spoke, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. "Emma, please," she whispered. "You're all we have." I stopped in my tracks, my back still turned to them. I felt my chest tighten, my anger fighting with the overwhelming feeling of betrayal. I had always believed that Linda understood me, that she was the one who would stand by me when I needed her. But in that moment, I realized something even worse than the betrayal of my father. It wasn't just John who had been part of this lie. It was my mother too. She had known. She had stood by silently while all of this happened, and she did nothing to stop it. "Don't," I said, my voice breaking. "Don't act like you didn't know. You've been silent this whole time. You never once asked me if I needed help, if I was okay. You never thought to ask if I was struggling, if I felt like I was carrying the weight of this family all on my own. I could feel the weight of their stares on me, but I didn't care anymore. My mind was made up. It was over. I'm done," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sadness. "I'm done being the one who always has to fix everything. I'm done giving and giving while you just take." You'll have to figure it out without me. I left the room then, not looking back. As I walked out, I felt a strange sense of relief, even as my heart ached. The family I had tried so hard to please was no longer my responsibility. And though it hurt to admit, I had to let them go. After leaving my family behind, a mix of emotions churned in me. Anger, betrayal, confusion, they all weighed on my mind. The truth was now undeniable, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover, more I needed to understand. John and Linda had been hiding things from me, and I was done playing the role of the oblivious daughter. For days, I ruminated over what I had discovered: the trust fund for Sophie, the hidden financial support they'd been offering her, while I had been left in the dark, carrying the family's financial burdens. But that wasn't the only thing that bothered me. No, there were deeper layers to this deception, and I was determined to peel them back. One night, after spending hours tossing and turning in bed, I made my decision. I needed answers, and the only way I was going to get them was to dig deeper into John and Linda's financial history. So I went to their home office, the one place I'd avoided before, where John kept everything hidden away. I had no idea what I would find, but I knew I had to look. It wasn't long before I was sifting through piles of financial records, bank statements, investment portfolios, and tax documents. The office smelled like leather and paper, the dim light casting long shadows across the desk. I pulled out one stack of papers after another, trying to make sense of the chaos. It felt like I was looking at the pieces of a puzzle, but I couldn't see the full picture yet. Then I found something that made my heart skip a beat. A transaction. Large sums of money had been transferred to an account that wasn't one of our usual banks. The name on the transaction was unfamiliar to me: Michael Foster. A strange sense of dread washed over me. Why would John be sending such a large amount of money to this person? And why had I never heard of him before? My hands trembled as I read through the document again, trying to process the information. This wasn't just a casual transaction. It was a pattern, one that suggested a much larger financial arrangement. The name Michael Foster kept popping up. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I needed to find out who this man was, and what role he played in all of this. The next morning, I set my plan in motion. I Googled the name, trying to find any trace of this person, but it didn't take long before I found an address. It was a small office building on the edge of town. I didn't know what to expect, but I had to go. My instincts told me that this was the missing link. When I arrived, I stood outside the building for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea if this would lead to more questions or more answers, but I knew I couldn't turn back. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Inside, the office was quiet. It was small, with a few filing cabinets and a desk stacked with papers. And behind that desk sat a man in his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and a sharp suit. Michael Foster. He looked up as I entered, his expression neutral but his eyes assessing me carefully. "Yes," he asked, his voice low but calm. "I'm Emma Miller," I said, my voice steady despite the growing tension in the air. "I need to talk to you about some financial transactions involving John Miller." His eyebrows arched slightly at the mention of John's name, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying me with a careful gaze. "You've come a long way," he said slowly. "Why don't you have a seat?" I sat down, my mind racing. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. I didn't know if he would answer my questions or dismiss me, but I couldn't leave without knowing more. "I know about the transfers," I said, keeping my voice calm. "The money that was sent to you. I need to understand why." Michael Foster didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He seemed to be weighing his options before speaking. Finally, he leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "John Miller and I have had a long relationship," he said, his voice measured. "I've been helping him make certain financial decisions for years. He's been seeking guidance about how to protect his family, about investments that could secure their future. This is about more than just the immediate money. It's about long-term planning." His words were cryptic, and they only fueled my curiosity. What exactly was he protecting? And what did he mean by long-term planning? Was this more than just a trust fund for Sophie? "You've been helping him?" I repeated, my voice tinged with disbelief. "For how long? And why haven't I been told about any of this?" Michael sighed, sitting back in his chair. Emma, there are things you don't understand. Some decisions need to be made in private. If you dig too deep, you could uncover things that could be dangerous. I froze, my pulse quickening. Dangerous? What was he talking about? What had John gotten himself into, and why was he so determined to keep me out of it? Dangerous, I repeated, barely able to keep my voice steady. What do you mean? He leaned forward again, his tone now almost a whisper. Some secrets are better left buried, Emma. Trust me. Dig too deep, and you might not like what you find. I felt a chill run down my spine. His warning was clear, and it only deepened the mystery. The more I uncovered, the more questions I had. I couldn't turn back now, but I also had no idea what I was getting myself into. I left Michael Foster's office with more questions than answers, and the unsettling weight of his words lingered in my mind. Dangerous, he had said. Some secrets are better left buried. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting too close to something I wasn't ready to understand. But one thing was clear, I could no longer stay passive in this game. I had to take control of my life, and that meant cutting off the toxic relationship with my family that had been draining me for years. For days I stayed in my apartment alone with my thoughts. I reflected on everything that had led me to this point, the years of sacrifice, the endless financial support, and the constant feeling of being taken for granted. The discovery of the trust fund had been the final straw, but it wasn't just the money that stung. It was the realization that I had been so focused on keeping the family afloat that I had lost sight of myself. My needs, my future, they had all been secondary. I had been a safety net for everyone else, while my own dreams had withered in the background. As I sat at my desk staring at my laptop, I realized something profound. I had given up so much for a family that didn't see me, didn't appreciate me, and never truly considered my sacrifices. And what had I gotten in return? A cold, secretive betrayal. I knew then that I had to stop enabling them. I had to stop financing their lifestyle, their hopes, and their dreams at the expense of my own. I pulled up the bank accounts, the car payment schedules, the family credit cards. It was time to make the changes I had been avoiding for too long. I started by canceling the automatic payments for Sophie's car. The thought of her car payments now being solely her responsibility was oddly liberating. For years, I had picked up the slack, paying for her bills while she lived her life without concern. It was time for her to face the consequences of her choices, just like I had to face mine. Next, I withdrew my name from all family accounts. I was no longer going to be their financial lifeline. John and Linda had made it clear that they didn't need me, at least not in the way I had been led to believe. And I was done playing the role of the dutiful daughter who gave without question. It was time for them to stand on their own 2 feet, just as I had to stand on mine. Finally, I transferred the money I had been saving for the future, money that I had held onto like a safety net of my own, into a separate investment fund. This wasn't just about securing my financial future. It was about reclaiming my life. For so long, I had given every spare dollar to them, thinking it would help, thinking it was my duty. Now I was investing in myself, in my own future. I deserved that. I deserved to plan for my own goals, for the life I wanted to create, not just the one I had been dragged into. The first day I woke up after making those decisions felt different. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's financial struggles on my shoulders anymore. There was no guilt, no shame in putting myself first. I had been so caught up in their needs, their desires, that I had forgotten to take care of the most important person, me. It wasn't easy. The guilt crept in, whispering that I was abandoning them, that I was being selfish. But deep down, I knew it was the right decision. I couldn't keep living my life in a way that served everyone but me. I had to take back my power. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice the change in myself. I wasn't as stressed or anxious. I didn't feel burdened by the weight of their expectations anymore. I was able to focus on my work with a new sense of clarity and purpose. I started making plans for the future, setting goals I had put on hold for far too long. For the first time, I felt like I was living my life for myself, not for anyone else. And that sense of freedom was everything. The days that followed were oddly peaceful. For the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing again. I had taken control of my finances, redirected my energy toward my own future, and stopped feeling responsible for everyone else's well-being. My routine became mine again. and the stress that had weighed me down for so long began to dissipate. It was as though a fog had lifted, and I was finally seeing clearly. I started to think about what I could do with the money I had set aside for myself, the money I'd been putting into a separate investment fund. It felt empowering to know that I wasn't financing anyone else's life anymore. I started making plans for the future, plans for me. I could finally put my money toward things I cared about, things I had always put on hold. The weight of the past few years, of constant sacrifice and unappreciated effort, was slowly lifting. But then, everything came crashing down in one single moment. It was a Saturday morning, and I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed with the name of my bank. I wasn't expecting any calls from them, so I answered with a simple, "Hello, Ms. Miller?" The voice on the other end was polite, but there was an urgency in it that caught my attention. "I'm calling to notify you of an unauthorized transaction. A large sum of money was transferred from your account, and we just wanted to verify that this was you." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, unauthorized?" I asked, my voice tight. The representative repeated the details of the transaction. "A transfer of $50,000 was made to an external account this morning. The transaction was flagged as unusual, and we've temporarily frozen your account until we hear from you." I froze. My mind raced, but I couldn't immediately grasp what had happened. I had been careful, so careful, about not letting anyone get their hands on my money again. I had taken steps to make sure no one could access my accounts. "Do you have any idea who made the transfer?" I asked, my voice shaky now. The representative hesitated. "It appears the transfer was made from an account under your name to an account registered under Sophie Miller." My heart skipped a beat. "Sophie?" I whispered, the name barely escaping my lips. "My sister." "Yes, Ms. Miller. It appears to be an internal transfer from one of your joint accounts." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My sister, Sophie, had accessed my money, the very money I had transferred into my own investment fund, money that I had saved for my future. And now she had taken a portion of it just like that. I hung up the phone, my mind spinning. I didn't want to believe it, but there was no mistaking it. Sophie had taken the money. The question was, why? I called her immediately, the anger welling up inside me with every passing second. It rang twice before she picked up. "Emma, what's wrong?" Sophie's voice was tentative, almost as if she already knew what I was going to say. "You took money from my account," I said, my voice low, filled with a mix of disbelief and fury. "You took $50,000. Why?" There was a long pause on the other end. Sophie sighed. "I didn't know what else to do, Emma. Dad and Mom, they're in serious debt. They're about to lose the house, and I didn't want them to lose everything. I had to help." I could feel my hand shaking as I gripped the phone tighter. "So you thought it was okay to take MY money? The money I had set aside for myself? My future? You didn't even ask me, Sophie. You just took it." "I didn't know who else to turn to," she shot back, her voice rising. "They were desperate. You don't understand, if I didn't do something they would lose everything. And I didn't want that." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had taken my money, and now she was justifying it. She thought it was acceptable to use my future for their mistakes, to fix their messes with my savings. "I've spent my whole life taking care of everyone," I said, my voice cracking. "And now you take from me too? Do you even see what you've done, Sophie?" "I'm sorry," she said quietly, and for a moment I almost believed it. I didn't think it through. But I was just trying to help. I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea hitting me. I didn't know if I could trust her anymore. This wasn't the sister I had once protected. This wasn't the family I had always believed in. She wasn't hating herself for what she had done. She was only sorry she had been caught. "Sorry," I repeated, the anger rising in me once more. "Sorry isn't going to fix this, Sophie. You've crossed a line I can't just overlook. You've crossed a line that I can't come back from." There was nothing more to say. I hung up the phone without another word, the reality of what had just happened setting in. I had tried to move on, to live for myself, but my family just kept pulling me back into their web of dependency. No matter how much I tried to escape, no matter how far I ran, they still depended on me. It felt like I was still trapped in the same cycle, only now I had even less trust in the people I had given everything to. I sat at the kitchen table, my phone in my hands, staring at the screen with a sense of dread. The text from John Miller had come in just hours ago, and as much as I had hoped for peace, it was clear that nothing would settle without confrontation. He had called a family meeting, and he wasn't calling me to reconcile. No, this was an all-out war. He wanted me to face the family, to explain myself, to justify why I had abandoned them. But I wasn't going to let him twist the truth anymore. No longer would I be the scapegoat. No longer would I allow them to manipulate me into doing their bidding. I was done being the one who carried their weight. I took a deep breath and grabbed the folder from the desk. Documents, receipts, statements. The evidence I needed to show exactly how much I had contributed to this family. More than $118,000 over 5 years. Property taxes, car payments, home repairs, money that had gone to them without a single thank you. It was time to show them what I had done for them and how they had repaid me. It was time for John to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made him. When I arrived at my parents' house, the tension in the air was palpable. Sophie was already there, standing with John and Linda, the three of them in an uncomfortable silence. But what struck me most was the group of relatives gathered in the living room. Uncle Dave, Aunt Catherine, and even a few cousins. I hadn't expected anyone else to show up, especially not after how things had gone down with my parents. But there they were, watching me enter with eyes full of judgment, uncertainty, and in some cases expectation. I walked to the center of the room and didn't waste any time. "Let's get this over with," I said firmly, my voice calm, but cutting through the tension like a knife. John looked at me, his face flushed with anger. "Emma," he started, voice shaking with frustration. "You've gone too far. You've turned your back on your family. All we ever did was try to help you, and now you—" "No, Dad," I interrupted, my voice unwavering. "You never helped me. You used me. You've used me for years. And now I'm done. I'm not going to keep pouring money into this bottomless pit." I pulled the folder from my bag and opened it, placing it on the coffee table for everyone to see. The documents spread out in front of them, detailing everything from property tax payments to car loans and repairs. John tried to interject, but I kept going, speaking louder, more determined now than ever. "I've been paying for everything for years. Over $118,000 just in the last 5 years alone. For all of you. Sophie's car payments, the vacation home, medical expenses, everything. And in return, what did I get?" I paused, letting my words sink in. I got nothing but more expectations. I got accusations of being selfish when I finally said no. Well, this is the truth. You used me, and I won't stand for it anymore. The room fell silent. John's face was pale now, his lips tight. Linda looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. But what struck me the most was Sophie. She was standing there, arms crossed, eyes darting around the room, not looking at me but at everyone else. She knew what I was saying was the truth, and she couldn't even bring herself to face it. But then, something unexpected happened. From the far side of the room, Uncle Dave spoke up, his voice firm but compassionate. "You're right, Emma," he said, his eyes locked on John. "You've been taking advantage of Emma for years. I've seen it, but I never thought to speak up. But what you've done to her, it's wrong. You've used her as a cash cow, and it's time the family sees the truth." I blinked, not expecting this. Uncle Dave had always been a quiet, reserved man, but his words hit hard. It was as if a wave of validation swept through the room. Aunt Catherine nodded in agreement, her face somber but resolute. "I've seen Emma work her butt off to keep everything together," she said, her voice soft but steady. "She's given more than any of us. And we've all taken it for granted." The shift in the room was almost palpable. What had started as a confrontation turned into an unexpected moment of support. John was visibly shaking now, his face turning an unhealthy shade of red. "You can't possibly understand," he spat, trying to regain control. "We were just trying to help Sophie. She needs this. She's trying to make something of herself." But no one was listening anymore. Uncle Dave stepped forward, facing John head-on. "Don't you see, John?" he said calmly. "This isn't about helping Sophie. This is about you being afraid to let go of your own responsibilities. You've always leaned on Emma, and now you're just using Sophie as a pawn to keep things going the way you want them to. It's wrong." John opened his mouth to argue, But the words caught in his throat. The truth was undeniable, and for the first time he couldn't twist it into something that worked in his favor. Sophie, standing at his side, finally met my eyes. There was no more defensiveness in her expression. Instead, there was guilt. She knew I was right, and it was the first time I saw her acknowledge that. For the first time, the family was forced to confront the truth of what had been happening. And I wasn't the only one standing up anymore. The people I had hoped would stand with me finally did. It felt like a small victory, a win for the truth. But there was still more to be done. This was just the beginning. The family meeting had left a strange feeling hanging in the air. An uneasy sense of victory, but also of uncertainty. For the first time, I had felt truly seen by some of my family, and the weight of years of resentment had lifted slightly. John and Sophie were left to digest what had been exposed, and I felt a strange satisfaction in that. I had stood up for myself, and now it seemed like the family could no longer pretend everything was fine. But just as I thought I might finally have control over my own life, a new unexpected opportunity emerged. A few days after the meeting, I received a call that would change everything. Klein and Associates. The voice on the other end of the phone said, "We've been following your career, Ms. Miller, and we're very impressed with your success in the trading world. We believe you have a unique insight, and we'd like to discuss a potential investment project with you." I wasn't sure what to make of it at first. Klein and Associates was a well-known investment firm, one that had handled high-profile deals and worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. This could be the break I had been waiting for, the chance to step up into a bigger game. I set up a meeting with them the next week, eager but cautious. I had worked so hard to get where I was, and now here was an opportunity to take it even further. When I walked into their office, I felt a surge of excitement. I had always dreamed of expanding my investments and working with people who understood the market on a larger scale. But what I didn't expect was what came next. As the meeting progressed, they introduced me to a large-scale investment project, one that had been in the works for years. It was a venture that promised high returns, but as I listened to the details, something didn't sit right. The project was connected to several key investments that were eerily familiar. They mentioned John Miller by name, and it wasn't just a passing mention. Klein and Associates had been involved in several of the projects that John had handled over the years, projects that had led to the financial mess my family was in. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I tried to keep my composure, but the realization hit me like a wave. This project was tied directly to the same investments John had made decisions on, decisions that I had always questioned. And now, here I was, being asked to join a venture that was built upon the very foundations of my family's financial web. The same web that had trapped me for years. At that moment, everything I had worked for felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I had fought so hard to break free from my family's control, to stop being the one who was constantly expected to save the day. But now I found myself standing at the edge of a decision that could pull me right back into the mess I had just escaped. "Why me?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "What makes you think I'm the right fit for this project?" The executive across the table smiled, but there was something calculating in his eyes. "You've proven yourself in the market, Ms. Miller. You've shown that you can handle high-stakes decisions. This project could be the next big step for you." But I didn't feel like I was stepping up. I felt like I was walking into a trap, one that was carefully laid by the same people who had controlled my family's finances. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't an opportunity. It was a baited hook. And if I bit, I would find myself right back in the same position I had been trying to escape. The pressure was mounting. I had worked so hard to be independent, to finally separate myself from the financial mess my family had created. And yet here I was facing a decision that could pull me right back into it. Would I take the risk, join the project, and perhaps make a fortune? Or would I walk away and continue to carve my own path, even if it meant losing out on an opportunity that could change everything? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let my family's mistakes define my future any longer. The price to pay for success might not just be the dollars and cents in front of me. It could be something far more precious: my independence, my peace of mind. The weeks after the meeting with Klein and Associates were a blur of uncertainty. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, caught between the opportunity of a lifetime and the price I would pay for it. But amid the chaos and the choices that loomed ahead, something unexpected happened. Something that I hadn't anticipated. It started with a call from Sophie. Her voice was quieter than usual, softer, as if she was carrying a weight she hadn't shown me before. "Emma," she began, hesitating. "I need to talk to you." The words caught me off guard. Sophie had never been the one to initiate difficult conversations, especially not after everything that had transpired. I didn't know what to expect, but I agreed to meet her the following afternoon at a cafe, just the two of us. I had no idea where this conversation would lead, but deep down, I knew something had changed. When I saw her, she looked different. There was no defensiveness in her expression, no hint of anger or entitlement. For the first time in a long time, she seemed vulnerable. "Emma, I've been thinking," Sophie started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about everything. What you said, what you found out. I didn't realize how much I had hurt you. And I didn't understand the depth of what you've been doing for us. For all these years." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I had no idea where she was going with this, but I couldn't stop listening. It was a shift I hadn't expected. Sophie was always the one who got things handed to her. The one who never had to worry about finances. The one who always seemed to think she deserved everything. But here she was talking to me in a way I had never heard before. "I was selfish," she continued, her voice cracking. "I didn't think about the consequences of what I did, taking the money from your account. I didn't think about how it would affect you. I've been living in this bubble, and I never really understood what it took for you to keep everything together."
"I'm sorry, Emma."
"I'm so sorry." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My emotions were a whirlwind: relief, anger, sadness, and even a little bit of guilt. Had she truly changed? Or was this just another attempt to smooth things over? "I've been given everything, Emma," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "And I've never had to fight for anything. You've sacrificed so much for me, for all of us. I don't deserve this trust fund. I don't deserve any of it. So I've made a decision." I leaned forward, unsure of what was coming next. Sophie paused, collecting her thoughts before she spoke again, her voice steadier now. "I'm going to use my trust fund to pay back everything," she said firmly. "The property taxes, the house, the money I took from you, everything. And I'll transfer a portion of the property ownership to you. I want you to have a stake in this, Emma. You've worked harder for it than anyone else. It's the least I can do." I was stunned into silence. Sophie had always been the one to avoid responsibility, to push things away when they got too hard. But here she was, taking accountability, making an effort to right the wrongs she had been a part of. It was more than I had ever expected from her. And yet, despite the relief I felt, there was still a part of me that couldn't shake the sense of injustice. As much as I wanted to believe that things were changing, that Sophie had truly learned something from all of this, the damage had been done. The family dynamics, what had been broken between us, couldn't be fixed overnight. The years of resentment, the years of being the one who always gave without ever being seen, couldn't be erased just by one act of generosity. But even so, there was a shift in the air, a subtle difference in how we both stood in that moment. I no longer felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on me. For the first time, I could breathe a little easier. The burden of always being the one to fix everything was gone. And while things between Sophie and me weren't perfect, they had started to change. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft but filled with sincerity. "I don't know if this will fix everything, but it's a start. And it means more than you realize." For the first time in what felt like forever, Sophie smiled. It wasn't a smile of relief or one that came from getting something she wanted. It was a smile that came from finally understanding. And for me, that was enough. As I left the cafe that afternoon, I felt a strange sense of closure. The truth had been spoken, the wrongs were being righted, and while there was still work to be done, I could finally see a path forward. The family I had spent so many years trying to please might never be the same, but at least I could let go of the financial burden I had carried for far too long. And in that I found my own peace.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.